Hey, so I said I was gonna do a prediction video slash history video for the Army Navy game today, but I had to work and I didn't have time to do a lot of research on it. Um, but I'm instead going to push the video I was gonna do tomorrow on the top three Heisman runners to today. So I've compiled the stats for these guys on the season, and I'm going to start with saying all three of these players have put up some very impressive numbers in this season. So um, I'm going to start with Deshaun Watson of Clemson. Deshaun Watson's a sophomore. He's completed 287 of 413 passes for 3,512 passing yards and 30 touchdowns. He's thrown 11 interceptions. His longest pass of the season is 67 yards, and he averages 8.5 yards per attempt. So, um, those numbers are just his passing numbers. They're really impressive. He leads the team in passing yardage, touchdowns, interceptions, and the longest pass. Now, that being said, he's their only quarterback who's played all season, so it's not far-fetched that he would be leading. It's actually expected that he would be leading all those stats. Um, and also expected that he wouldn't be leading the completion percentage stat because he throws more often than the others. But here's the impressive one. He has 887 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns rushing, and his longest rush of the year is for 63 yards, and he averages 5.4 yards per attempt. So, um, number the number 11 touchdowns, he leads the team in touchdowns. So he leads in both passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns for the team. He has a total of 4,399 offensive yardage, including passing and rushing, and 41 total touchdowns. His numbers speak for themselves. However, while he has more total touchdowns and more yardage than the other two, he is a quarterback, and quarterbacks tend to get a lot more yardage and a lot more scores than the other positions. Mainly because if they're throwing to a receiver, they're throwing to different receivers through the whole game, so one receiver's not going to get all of it. And running backs, you don't get as much yardage just because of the wear and tear on it. I think his case is very strong. I'm going to leave the argument part till the end of the video once I get through all the stats. Next was Derrick Henry of Alabama. He is a junior. Now here's his stats. He has 1,986 rushing yards, 23 rushing touchdowns, a longest rush of 74 yards, and an average of 5.9 yards per rush. He has 97 receiving yards, a longest of 28 yards, and an average of 9.7 receiving yards. That puts his total at 2,083 offensive yards and 23 total touchdowns. Now, he leads the team with stats-wise with rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, longest rush, and average yards per rush. So he leads the team in pretty much every category on the rushing side of the ball. And he's a running back, so that's impressive no matter what. His numbers are possibly some of the strongest, including that 23 rushing touchdowns. That is a great number, even in the NFL, where they do it in 16 games. This guy's done it in 13. So that's impressive. And then there's Christian McCaffrey, who is just an all-purpose. His stats are going to take a while to go through. So he's a sophomore for Stanford. He has 1,847 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. His longest rush is 70 yards, and he averages 5.8 yards per rush. He also has 540 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, a longest reception of 67 yards, and an average of 13.2 yards per reception. He has also completed 2 of 3 passes for 39 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. He also has 1,042 kick return yards and 1 touchdown on a kick return. His longest is 98 yards, and his average return is 28.9 yards. He also has 67 punt return yards and a longest of 31, an average of 4.8. That puts him at a total of 3,535 all-purpose yards and 15 total touchdowns. Now, what's most impressive about this is you see players get touchdowns in 3 ways in any given season. You can see him get a rushing touchdown. You can see him get a receiving touchdown. You can see him get a kick return touchdown. That's usually the combination, or a passing and a rushing and a kick and something else. It's very rare that you have 4 different kinds of touchdowns. He has a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, a passing touchdown, and a kick return for a touchdown. That is insane. He broke the all-purpose yardage record for running backs. He beat. I can't wrap my head around this guy's stats. He is honestly an all-around player. He's all well-rounded player. And here's what he leads the team in. He leads the team in rushing yards. He leads the team in the longest rush from line of scrimmage. He leads the team in receiving yards. He leads the team in kick return yards. And he has the longest kick return. And I don't know, but I'm fairly certain he also has the most kick returns for touchdowns on the season. So that's 5, potentially 6 things he leads the team in. I gotta say, looking at the stats here, in general, without McCaffrey, Stanford would not be a 10-win team. They would be a lot harder to put up some wins than they were with him. That being said, I'm looking at the stats here, and while Deshaun Watson is impressive with 41 total touchdowns and 4,399 yards, he leads total touchdown and total yardage. He leads the other 2. But I don't think he's going to win. And it's because he is a quarterback and the yardage is easier for him to get. Those touchdowns are easier for him to get. But I look at these other 2. What I look at is that Deshaun Watson's season, while phenomenal, was not the best season a quarterback has ever had. And then I look at Derrick Henry. And it's not the best a running back's ever had, but it is near the top of the list in terms of his team's history. So I think he has a very, very solid case. Plus, he is the front runner currently. Now, that being said, I'm looking at Christian McCaffrey, and I don't understand how this guy cannot win the Heisman. He broke the all-purpose yardage record. He is Stanford's team. And the biggest criteria for the Heisman is, would your team have succeeded without you? And the thing is, all 3 of them meet this criteria. Clemson would not have been undefeated and in the playoffs without Deshaun Watson. Alabama would not be in the playoffs with 1 loss and an SEC champion without Derrick Henry. Without Christian McCaffrey, Stanford would not be a 2-loss Pac-12 champion. That all being said, I think Alabama could find a way to win without Derrick Henry. I don't think they would have been SEC champion or in the playoffs, but they could find a way to win without him. Clemson has stars, and I think they would have won games. They might have been 8-4, maybe 7-5, but they would have won games without Deshaun Watson, but he gave them that push to be great. They would have been okay. He made them great. I look at Christian McCaffrey, and without Christian McCaffrey, I look at Stanford, and I'm not sure they're bowl eligible without him. He led the team in total rushing yards, in total receiving yards, in total kick return yards. Half their drives started in great field position after a kickoff because of him. You think about it. If he catches the ball at the goal line, he averaged getting them to about the 29-yard line. So if he's receiving kicks at that point, he's going to at least the 30 almost on average. So if he's out of the end zone, he's beyond the 30 when he returns these balls on average. So that's insanely good. Field position in the field position game, which is what Stanford played a lot of this season. Now, he is honestly, I think he's the best all-around player, and I think he affected his team more than the other two did. And that's not to say that the other two did not affect their team significantly, because they both did. Like I said, both Alabama and Clemson, I don't think would be in the playoffs without those players, without Deshaun Watson and Derrick Henry on their team. But Christian McCaffrey was Stanford this year. And I think I gotta say, he has the strongest case in my mind for the Heisman. And it's just, I think his case is out there. Now, I will say this: if he does not win it, it has to be Derrick Henry, because you can make a very, very strong case for Derrick Henry, and I think he could win it. But I do believe it's going to be Christian McCaffrey. It has to be. If you look at his entire body of work this season, he's got touchdowns everywhere. He doesn't have as many as Derrick Henry does. He doesn't have as many as Deshaun Watson, but he has more times than those two. So I think that speaks for itself. I think Christian McCaffrey should be the front runner, with Derrick Henry maybe a point behind him, and then Deshaun Watson pulling up in third. Now, I've been singing Christian McCaffrey's praises. I only have a couple minutes left here, but I will say something that is very, very impressive is leading your team in passing touchdowns and leading your team in rushing touchdowns. That is insanely good, and Deshaun Watson deserves all the credit for that. He deserves to win any awards you can give a quarterback. But I honestly think that he shouldn't win the Heisman, only because these two ahead of him affected. Honestly, I can spew this as much as I want. I can say whatever I want, whatever I can about this. The reality is, whoever wins this Heisman will be deserving of it. They all three meet the criteria, and I think that's great, given how many Heismans they've awarded in the past, where the second and third place were just kind of there because they had to have someone in those positions. It's gonna be interesting. I can't wait till Saturday night to find out who the Heisman winner is. I would love to see Stanford get a Heisman winner in there, in Christian McCaffrey. But hey, let me know what you guys think. Comment below, let me know. And if you like the video, click the like button and subscribe. I will be back tomorrow with another video. And if you check my Facebook page, I will have an article up on there as well. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm glad to have you guys with me.